Time now for the Sunday Talk, where we tap into the debate of the week. This week, what's being called the war on Halloween. Brock University's student union has released a list of costumes that are banned at this year's Halloween party. Geishas, feathered headdresses, and bindis prohibited. And Brock is just the latest among a number of institutions trying to limit what could be seen as offensive outfits. From adorable kids asking for candy to dressing up and partying, Halloween's all about taking on a new identity. But in recent years, costume selection has become dicey. First, it was blackface, reminiscent of minstrel shows where white people made fun of slaves.
When you put the color on and you act like a buffoon, you're connecting the race to the buffoonery. And that's problematic.
Then, Indigenous costumes became controversial.
That's my culture and it's not a costume.
Recently, Bill Cosby costumes were banned at one school to avoid triggering victims of sexual assault. And now, dressing up like Caitlyn Jenner is off some lists too.
It makes me quite uncomfortable because it's commodifying trans identities and kind of like poking fun at her.
Maybe it's time for Halloween to get back to its roots.
Halloween's supposed to be spooky, right? Dress up as a ghost, dress up as a zombie, something with blood pouring out, you know? That's Halloween to me.
Good idea? Not for some.
Halloween's just gotten so gruesome. And I think that people just need to consider what their actions could cause people.
This man was asked to remove his lawn decoration, considered offensive to people affected by suicide. Home Depot pulled its scary Peeper Creeper window decoration after a customer said it glorified voyeurism. Even one of the most traditional Halloween characters is under attack. Canadian Tire pulled scary clown decorations from its shelves, saying it was being sensitive to recent pranks. And Canada's Wonderland shut down its haunted asylum attraction after complaints it stigmatizes mentally ill people. I'm joined by our panelists. Supriya Dwivedi is a columnist with the Toronto Sun. Elamine Abdelmahmoud is social media editor at BuzzFeed Canada. And Stephen Marsh is a culture writer with Esquire magazine. So happy Halloween, sort of.
Thank you.
Happy Diwali as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, actually, Supriya, I'll start with you. What do you think? Is all of this, is this just fun sucking, or is there a reason to be upset here?
So I think there are definitely individual instances where we can come to the conclusion that they've gone too far, and this is people just being sensitive. But I think given the prevalence of highly racist costumes and highly offensive costumes, I think it makes sense that every year we find ourselves having this exact same conversation. And ultimately, I think what it comes down to is that Halloween is often a holiday in which people who are normally jerks can express their jerkdom, if you will, on the outside. And I think that's what it comes down to, because if you are wearing a costume, let's say is wearing a bindi or appropriating my Indian culture, I think that is a little bit offensive, because ultimately that's my identity and my culture, and you're essentially wearing it as a caricature.
So should jerks be allowed to be jerks, or do we need rules to stop them?
Of course we need rules to stop them. And we've always had rules to stop jerks, or at least point out to them that maybe you're being a bit of a jerk. I think there was a university that had a level of like how offensive is your Halloween costume.
You get colors for how offensive it is. Yeah.
That's absurd, right? But we can absolutely have a conversation about why some of these costumes are offensive. And I think the fact that this keeps coming back up is precisely because there are people who every single year are like, you know what I should be? A black person. Or you know what I should be? An Indigenous person, because that's funny or that's entertaining. And we keep having to be like, well, here we are again having this conversation. Of course you can't do that.
Stephen?
Well, I mean, I would just point out that Halloween has always been a holiday about being inherently offensive. Like, the point of Halloween is that you dress up as a devil in order to flout the Christian conventions of your society. And you dress up as a witch to flout the conventions of your society.
You actually studied this, right?
Well, I did. I mean, I did part of it.
You're a Halloween major?
Well, no, but I mean, I did study the Lords of Misrule holidays in Renaissance England, which are sort of roots to this. And I mean, what they are is that by having one day where you're offensive, where you were subversive, where you show what you don't believe, where you show what is evil and you become evil, then you reassert your goodness the next day. It's
Like,
no, it's
like
no,
the movie The Purge, that you're supposed all crime becomes legal for one day, so
well, yeah,
you're
that's
good for a year.
That's a ripoff. There were antecedents in Roman history. There are certainly ones in England.
But it's
do
a
you,
bit absurd.
But do you actually believe that the white frat guy named Logan is dressing up in blackface because he wants to be offensive and go against conventions this one day, then the next day
Well,
he's out there?
Let me just give you an example. Like, the trans woman in that, trans person in that thing, she said that that we should get back to zombies, right? So zombies, the origin of zombies is a 1936 film called White Zombie, which is a parody of a Haitian tradition, which is about undead people as reborn slaves. So there is actually nothing more offensive than the zombie tradition in terms, it is literally a mockery of the only successful black slave revolt in the Americas.
Why can't
But
we
does
use-
anyone who thinks they are dressing up as a zombie actually understand that?
No, but why can't we use the bar as people who are complaining about something, right? So I'm not sure
Well,
I'm
that's it.
hearing, right?
Yes, that's it.
That's a reasonable bar. Like if there are black people around you saying, please don't dress up in blackface, don't do it.
But
If there are people-
literally every costume that can be invented, you will find someone who is offended by it.
Sure, but that's
I
the
mean,
reason,
anyone
I
who is dressed up as a sexy nurse is offending nurses.
I don't think that's true.
Healthcare professionals are not sexual objects.
So you think that's all right, and that everybody else should chill out?
No, what I'm saying is that this tradition was invented very much as a way of channeling offensive behavior.
Well, I guess the question is, where is the line? I think most people would have a problem with blackface and have for years. But beyond that, where is the line?
I think you kind of know it when you see it. So I don't know.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I don't know if we can set out hard and fast rules per se.
Some of this is seen as racist. Some of it is seen as shocking and could be sort of emotionally scarring, like triggers. Should be.
So the thing with triggers is that triggers are so hyper-specific to the person. So for one person, it could be a mask. For another person, it could be the smell of aftershave. For somebody else, it could be a car honking in the background. So I don't know how we can take into consideration every single person's individual triggers, but there are some pretty obvious ones. And if I was wearing, let's say, a Bill Cosby mask, and somebody came up to me to say, could you please not wear that? I was actually sexually assaulted, and it triggers me. I'd have to be a pretty big jerk to say no and keep the mask on.
What do you think about this, catering to people's sensitivities?
Yeah, I think that's what we've evolved to do. That's just like the civil thing to do
I'm not
with
sure.
people around you.
No,
I
see,
mean,
I don't see, when you say it's the civil thing to do, I think that's really imprecise.
What do you mean?
Like Halloween is a product of civilization. Halloween is a day where you put all your offensiveness into one thing, and then the rest of the day you have normalcy. And it's quite consciously understood. Why you have children
I think
dressing
that's
up
the
as
way it
pirates.
was.
You
I'm
have
not sure
children
it is
dressing
like
up
that
as
now.
the rapist maniacs of the 18th century
I
to
don't
turn
know
it
if that's
into a
what
joke.
people think of it, though. When you see a kid and a pirate, I don't think rapist
But
maniac. I think
you don't know
what's
what
his
they're
face from
thinking.
Pirates of the Caribbean, and you give him candy and you go on your rest of your night.
right. That's
But the
usually
meaning
what
of it,
we've
you can't
arrived at.
judge the intention of someone. Like that's just a black hole. The point is, if we want to live in a society where we don't give anyone offense, what does that society look like? Is that society healthy?
I'm not sure that's what we're trying to accomplish here. I think what we're trying to do is not cause obvious injury, right? So like live your life in such a way that is not deliberately causing offensiveness to people,
I'm sorry.
like indigenous people
I'm
who
sorry, I
see
was
you
just told
wearing
that
a Pocahontas costume.
if you wear aftershave, you could be triggering someone, right? I mean, you
Well,
said that.
I mean, that's just
so
the way
you
triggers
don't know
work.
what your effects of these symbols are going to
How
be in the world.
important is intent? You know, I guess the argument could be made that not everybody who dresses as an Indian princess is mocking. That it could be seen as
I think
being respectful.
Absolutely, and so I think intent definitely matters, but ultimately if you have somebody of that culture, of that race, or of that religion that is telling you and educating you and saying this is in fact very offensive, then I think that's a learning experience, and you can say, okay, now I know I won't do it again next year. But given that we have these sorts of conversations literally every year, and they're to exactly of this nature, I don't understand how this keeps happening.
Okay,
That's my bar.
Let
That's my bar.
me give you an example. PK Subban is dressed up as Prince tonight. It's great. Look at it on Twitter. So what if a Prince fan comes to PK Subban and said, "You've traumatized me because I had really horrible experiences after Prince's death, and it's offensive to me that you're dressed as Prince." Should he have to take off his
No,
Prince
No,
costume?
that's an absurd example.
I think that's an
but,
absurd
right?
example.
Because-
Yeah,
I
think
don't
that's
understand.
unreasonable.
One of the most controversial examples lately has been Caitlyn Jenner. So are people dressing up as Caitlyn Jenner? Some people, could that not be honoring her? Some people see her as a hero.
Of course. There's no blanket rule in this particular situation. If someone is dressing up like Caitlyn Jenner because they see her as a hero, that's amazing. If
But how
someone
do you
is,
tell? How do you make a rule then?
I think you know. I think you know when you see it. If you're
we know if they think of the frat boys dressing up like
you guys
Caitlyn
keep
Jenner.
saying we can have no blanket rules, but people are making blanket rules, and you keep saying there's no way to tell, but I can always tell.
Well,
I mean,
because
this is
there is
not.
no way
This
to.
is not.
It's like you don't know it until you see it. If somebody is
That's
dressing up as
useless.
Caitlyn Jenner because they think of they think of Caitlyn to be a hero and are trying to bring awareness to the trans community, then sure, I guess. But again, if you're a white frat guy named Logan who's dressing up as Caitlyn Jenner,
What do you
Poor
think
Logan.
is Logan?
I know. Sorry, it's always my go-to name example.
Logan Lives Matter.
Is that Wolverine's name?
But
Is that-
yeah, well, I don't know.
I don't know.
But all this to say is that I don't think I think you know the intention, and I'm not
You know the
saying
intention by the race of the person doing it?
No,
Is that-
know
that's what
the
you're
By the
saying?
intention
performance of
by
it.
the performance and
Right?
the outwardness of how they're choosing to present themselves.
So, yeah.
And
in that
ultimately,
way, it
I
would
think if
be
a trans
possible.
person came to any cis person and said, I find this to be extremely offensive, then I think it's up to that cis person to go, okay, cool. How can you know what it's like to be that other person? And so if that other person is telling you what their experience is, aren't you going out of your way to be a jerk and you're saying my Halloween costume is more important than your identity and your lived experience?
Well, this is a holiday. So a holiday is a day set aside for what is extraordinary, for what is not permitted, for what is not ordinary, right? So, and often for what is, and this holiday is expressly set aside for what is illicit. And it is set aside for what is illicit in order to diminish it, in order to give it less power.
But the idea,
so what I'm
the
saying
idea of what you're talking about, I think, is a little bit divorced from the application, from Logan. Poor Logan that we
I
keep
know,
picking
poor
on.
Logan.
Who decides that he wants to dress up in blackface because he really likes Kanye West. And he's going to like enact all kinds of buffoonery and he's going to be dressed up in blackface. And you look at that kid and be like, your intentions are not good, right? Like this
But
particular
why is
situation.
a child dressed as the devil? Are his intentions good? I don't
I think the
so.
intentions of the child
I
are to
think-
get candy. I don't think the kid's intention is anything
fair.
beyond that.
No, the intention is to be naughty and to do things that aren't permitted
No,
and to do things that are offensive.
I think it's more about candy than it is about like subverting Christian tradition in like
Well,
know
candy is
18th
also
century
subversive.
mores.
Candy is also what you're not allowed.
I can't-
Look, I mean, the point
This
of
is
this holiday.
getting really meta.
Yeah, so Stephen,
just
what
not sure,
I really want to know,
Yeah.
it's time for true confessions. Have you ever worn anything that Elamine would consider inappropriate for
No,
Halloween?
I don't think
or
I
your
have.
Kids? How careful are you?
Well, I wore a really ugly Hobbit costume when I was about 12, but I've actually never understood why anyone over the age of 12 would wear a Halloween costume. But
Candy?
Candy, I guess,
Fun?
if you're going trick or treating. But like, I mean, no, I don't think I have.
So is Halloween
I have.
you've
What have you worn that was offensive?
Well, I mean, like I dressed up as Che Guevara one year, and I'm just like not sure if that was the best choice, you know?
Genocidal maniac?
Yeah, exactly.
Rounded up.
Right. A complicated history. No, so that
Yeah.
you know, so I would consider that in like the maybe question that decision Elamine column. You know, like that's I think
Right.
it's a question mark.
I went as a
Think that's
hipster one year. I don't know if that's offensive to hipsters or offensive to
That just.
to Stephen.
I'm not even going to say that you're going to
because-
prove
yeah,
that proves that you are a hipster.
Yeah.
Going as a hipster.
Yeah.
well, we'll see how everyone dresses tomorrow. Thanks so much, guys. That was fun.
Sure.